All right, take two. Mark dropped the clutch and the big truck seemed to leap up the hill. He barely stopped the red beast when everyone was piling out and running for the back door. When Mark stepped inside, the first thing he saw was Gunny sitting at the kitchen table with his arm in a sling. There goes the bookmarker again. What happened? Are you okay? Who else got shot? Mark demanded with the others standing behind him. Gunny answered the questions in reverse order of the way they were asked. Your friend Rodney got shot twice. He's in bad shape. Lisa and Doc Vasquez are still working on him down at Doc's house. The old man paused as he squeezed his wife's hand. Mark hadn't even noticed her sitting there. I'm fine. I just took one to the meaty part of my arm. Not much more than a scratch, really. We went to get the parts for the tractor. Rodney, George, and me. Is George okay? Jim interrupted. Yeah, he's fine. In fact, he was so cool under fire, I'd have sweared he was in the Corps. Gunny paused, shaking his head. This is all my fault. I should have been more careful. Anyway, the three of us went to Mr. Jones' house to look at the tractor. Rodney said he had parts he thought would work, and George was so excited to see if we could get it to run that we headed straight to town to get him. I made you take extra guys with you on your trip, and I should have followed my own advice. Driving through town was weird. A lot of neighborhoods were burned to the ground. Some were totally deserted, and some were trashed. A couple had been in them going about their business. A couple had people in them going about their business. In those two, other than the fact that almost everybody was armed, it was almost like nothing was wrong. They watched us like a hawk, but when we waved, they waved back. When we got to Rodney's shop, it had been vandalized. All the doors and windows were broken, and lots of his stock had been strewn everywhere. We were real careful going in, but no one was around. We hadn't even seen one person in the neighborhood. The cash register and some other things were missing, but Rodney said none of them were really worth anything. I had George watch the front, and I watched the back while Rodney got the parts. It took him some time to sort through the mess and find what he wanted, but he finally did. I looked out the front before we went out, but the bastards had hidden behind some cars, and I didn't see them. I just assumed it was all fine, and we went waltzing out the front door like we was going to Sunday school. When we cleared the door, they popped up and started shooting from across the street. If they'd waited until we were in the car, they probably would have mowed us down like bowling pins. Rodney got hit in the thigh and the right side of his chest. He fell back, and I pulled him back into the store. When I grabbed him up is when they got me in the arm. I found some clean shop towels and a roll of tape and bandaged him up as best I could. George was shooting back at the MZBs with his pistol and was keeping them pinned down behind the cars pretty good. In fact, he did real good. I just had to remind him not to shoot from the same spot every time. The MZBs only had pistols too, thank God, and they wouldn't penetrate the cinder block wall unless they hit the same spot several times. If they'd had rifles, we'd have been in deep kimchi. I had Beulah with me, and I ran up to one of the windows and peeked out. One of them popped up to shoot at George, and I tagged him. The buckshot folded him in half like a dollar bill. After that, they just stuck their hands up to shoot. I got Rodney's SKS and watched for where they were all shooting from. When I knew where all three were, I started shooting through the car bodies. 30 seconds later, it was over. George covered me with my shotgun while I went over to make sure they was all down for good. 2 points for Gunny. Then we got Rodney into the back seat of his car and headed home. I thought about taking him to a hospital, but I figured he'd get tended to faster here. I didn't even know if the hospital was still there or not. We decided to take the expressway. I was afraid of running into an MZB roadblock, but we decided the risk was worth it to get Rodney here as quick as possible. We almost did, but we was too quick for him. What happened? Jim asked. That car of Rodney's is a fast sumbitch, so fast it kind of scared me. We was making good time. Someone had bulldozed all the stalled cars off of 410, so we didn't have to worry about hitting one. They were sideways on the sides of the road. Anyway, I was doing 120 and my foot wasn't even on the floor. Gunny's eyes got big. We were coming up on that long bridge that crosses the river. You know the one I'm talking about? He asked no one in particular. Everyone nodded their heads, but no one said anything. I could see a couple of cars sitting sideways just on my side of the bridge and a bunch more on the far side. I didn't give it much thought. I figured those were stalled on the bridge and whoever cleared the road had pushed them there. As soon as we hit the bridge, I saw a bunch of MZBs come out from behind the cars on the other side and started pushing them into the road. I glanced in the mirror, and there was some more pushing than the ones where I just passed, too. I punched the accelerator, and the car rocketed up to 140. We got past the bridge before they could block it off. If we'd have just been tooling along at normal speed, we would have been trapped. They took a couple of pot shots at us once we passed, but they didn't hit nothing. After that, we didn't have no more trouble, and we got here pretty quick. "How's Rodney doing?" Mark asked. "He was in and out as we was coming home and having trouble breathing. He lost a lot of blood. The leg wound isn't that bad, but Lisa said the chest shot went through his lung. She told me while she was patching up my arm that they had got the bleeding stopped and reinflated his lung, but it was touch and go. She went back to Doc's house a little while ago to watch him while Doc got some sleep. I'm sorry about this, Karate Man. I should have made us come back here and get a couple more guys before we went to town. Gunny, nobody could have done any better than you did. This could have happened to any of us. I'm just glad you were there to handle the situation and get everyone back here quickly. We just have to make sure, all of us, that we don't forget that we can't let our guard down for even a second." This was the first time Gunny had needed a pep talk, Mark thought. "What about Rodney's family? Where are they?" "They're all down at Doc's. Jess is with them." Mark turned to his children and told them to unload the coolers and switch out the ice bottles so the meat would stay cold. Manny asked Victor to help them. Mark, Jim, and Manny headed to the Vasquez house. When they got there, Jess and Rodney's wife Donna were sitting on the front porch on a bench. Jess had her arm around the woman who Mark could tell was an emotional mess. The boys were asleep on a blanket on the ground. Mark never knew what to say in difficult situations, and this one was no different. As he approached the two women on the bench, Jess looked up at him. The look on her face told Mark the news wasn't good. Mark knew he had to say something. "I'm so sorry, Donna. We're all praying for him," he choked out. The woman looked up at him with vacant eyes and nodded her head. Mark heard Jim and Manny offer their words of comfort and hope. Jess stood up and pulled the men to the side. "Lisa said his chances aren't good, but that if he makes it until morning, he might have a shot," she explained. "Manny, do you know your blood type?" "I think it's B positive. Rodney is O negative. We only found one other person in the neighborhood who has the right blood type. It's Sherry Henderson." Lisa took 2 pints of blood from her. She was looking quite pale when Lisa was done with her. Lisa said she might be able to get another pint tomorrow, but Sherry is very petite, so Lisa isn't sure. "Maybe the sheriff could see if the hospital has any blood," Jim suggested. "We checked with him. He checked it out and called us back and said that the hospital had run out of fuel for their generator a week ago. They got some more, but not before all of the blood went bad. He said he checked with all of the surrounding counties, and all of them were either in the same situation our hospital is in, or that they already had used up their entire supply of O negative. I didn't know it, but you can give O negative blood to anyone. Unfortunately, it's fairly rare, and those with that type can only take their type. Lisa said we were lucky to find even one person here with it. I've been thinking," Jess continued, "and I know what we should do with John and Marion's house. We should turn it into a hospital. Doc had to spend a lot of time finding the things he and Lisa needed to operate. If we turned the Olsen house into a hospital, they could have those things out all the time." "That sounds like a good idea," Manny said. "I agree," Mark stated. "We can vote on it tomorrow night." Mark looked at his watch. It was almost time for him to report for duty. He excused himself to walk back to his house. He asked Manny to walk with him. "Manny, I'm concerned about our taking our little road trip tomorrow. With what happened today with Gunny and Rodney, I think we should put it off." "I understand," Manny replied, "but I still feel like I have to go, even if it's just me and my Suburban." "I'm not saying we won't go, Manny, but what good does it do us if we can't be sure of the safety of those we're going to get? I'm just saying let's plan this out better, and if it means we don't go until later in the week, at least we can be confident we can get there and back without getting anyone hurt or killed." "You're right, Mark. I see why everyone looks up to you. You always make the right decisions." "That's a load of crap, Manny, and you know it. I make just as many, if not more, mistakes as anyone else. But you look at the big picture and put the group ahead of yourself. That's why you're the leader. I never asked to be the leader, and I don't want to be the leader. To the people who live here, you are our leader. You better get used to the fact, mi amigo." Manny paused, seeming to enjoy watching his friend squirm. "Tell me something. Is it more likely that everyone who lives here is wrong, or that you are wrong?" "Just because everyone thinks something doesn't make it true," Mark argued. "That may be so, but just because you don't believe it, that doesn't make it not true, right?" Mark looked sideways at the Hispanic philosopher. "You told me you never finished high school. When did you take a logic course?" "I didn't," Manny smiled. He reached up and pinched the top of his ears together. "I just used to watch a lot of Star Trek, and guess who my favorite character was?" "Okay, Spock, I give in. For now, that is," Mark smiled back. "I'll talk to you tomorrow." "Aye, aye, Captain Kirk. Live long and prosper." Mark winced at the corny reference and left Manny standing on the corner, trying to make the Vulcan greet sign.